What would you do if a ghostly horse appeared outside your window every midnight, searching for a love that death couldn't break? Tell me your name and where you're watching Whispering Frontier Love Tales from in the comments below. It all began in the year 1887 in the frontier town of Redemption Ridge, Colorado. A dusty settlement carved into the foothills of the Rockies, where silver brought men seeking fortune, and secrets lay buried beneath the sagebrush. Sarah Brennan was the town's school teacher, a widow of 28, who'd come west to escape the ghosts of the Civil War that took her husband. She lived in a small wooden cottage at the edge of town where the wind carried the scent of pine and the nights stretched long and quiet. Everything changed the day the Stallion appeared. It was a Tuesday in late July when Sarah awoke to the sound of hoofbeats, slow, deliberate, echoing through the sleeping town. She pulled aside her curtain and gasped. Standing in the moonlit town square was a magnificent white horse, its coat glowing pale as starlight, its dark eyes fixed on something only it could see. For 3 minutes it stood perfectly still. Then, like smoke on the wind, it vanished. By morning, Sarah wondered if she'd dreamed it. But the question died on her lips when she saw the crowd gathering in the square, their faces pale, their voices hushed. The ghost horse had returned to Redemption Ridge. At first, Marshal Marcus Cole dismissed the sightings as hysteria. He stood on the steps of the general store, his weathered face set hard against the growing panic. He says, "Folks, there's no such thing as ghost horses," his voice steady. "Probably just a wild Mustang wandering down from the high country. The moonlight plays tricks." But that night, it happened again. And this time, 20 witnesses saw it. The Stallion appeared at exactly midnight in the exact same spot, stood for exactly 3 minutes, then turned toward the old mission ruins at the edge of town and disappeared like morning fog. On the third night, Sarah couldn't stay inside. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped into the square just as the church bell began to toll midnight. The air turned cold, the wind died, and there he was. The Stallion was even more magnificent up close, powerful, ethereal, his silver-white coat seeming to glow from within. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. They held such longing, such desperate searching, that Sarah felt tears spring to her own. She took a step closer. The horse's ears flicked toward her, and for a moment they simply stood there, woman and spirit, suspended in moonlight. That's when she noticed it. Around the Stallion's neck, barely visible, was a tattered ribbon, faded blue, the color of forget-me-nots. "What are you looking for?" she whispered. The Stallion tossed his head, and a sound escaped him. Not quite a whinny, more like a cry of anguish that seemed to echo from somewhere far beyond this world. Then he reared up, his hoofs pawing at nothing, and vanished. Sarah stood alone in the empty square, her heart racing. Whatever this creature was searching for, it had been searching for a very, very long time. The next morning, Thomas Whitehorse was shoeing a mare when Sarah appeared at his forge. Thomas was a Ute elder who'd chosen to stay when his people were forced onto reservations. He was the town's blacksmith and its keeper of forgotten stories. "The blue ribbon," Sarah said without preamble. "What does it mean?" Thomas's hammer stopped mid-swing. He set it down slowly, his weathered face growing distant. "So the story is true," he said quietly. "I wondered if he would ever return." He led her inside his small workshop and pulled out a wooden box, battered with age. Inside was a photograph from 1862, 25 years old. It showed a beautiful young Mexican woman standing beside a magnificent white stallion. Around the horse's neck was a blue ribbon. Her name was Isabella Morales, daughter of Don Alejandro Morales, the man who first discovered silver in these hills. And that horse was Esperanza, hope. Sarah stared at the photograph. What happened to him? Thomas's eyes grew dark. Love happened, and jealousy, and death.
Thomas told the story the way a man tells a truth he's carried too long. Isabella Morales had been promised to a young cavalry officer named Daniel Brennan. They'd met in Santa Fe, fallen in love beneath the cottonwoods, and planned to marry. Daniel had to report to his regiment, but he'd promised to return. They would meet at the old Spanish mission and ride away together, start a new life where the past couldn't touch them. But there was another man, Jonathan Brenner, a prospector who'd worked Isabella's father's mine. He wanted Isabella. More than that, he wanted the silver, the land, the power that came with the Morales name. When Isabella refused him, he didn't accept it gracefully. She planned to leave on the night of August 15th, 1862, Thomas continued. She would ride Esperanza to the mission, where Daniel was waiting, but Brenner found out. He confronted her on the trail near Devil's Pass. Sarah's hands trembled. What did he do? They say there was a struggle. Isabella wouldn't be taken. She spurred Esperanza forward, trying to escape. But the trail was narrow, the night was dark. Both horse and rider went over the cliff. The silence in the forge was absolute. Daniel waited at the mission all night, Thomas said softly. When dawn came and Isabella didn't, he went searching. He found them at the bottom of Devil's Pass. Isabella still in the saddle, Esperanza's neck broken trying to protect her even in the fall. Daniel buried them both in secret, near the mission where they were supposed to start their new life together. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. And then Daniel Brennan rode off to war. They say he became a captain, fought at Shiloh, and died with Isabella's name on his lips. Heartbroken, never having recovered from losing her. Sarah felt something click into place. Brennan. My late husband's name was John Brennan. He was from Tennessee, said his family had fought in the war. Thomas nodded slowly. Daniel was likely his uncle. The frontier is smaller than we think. Meanwhile, Marshal Cole was doing his own investigation. Something about the ghost horse bothered him, not because he believed in spirits, but because he didn't. If there was a haunting, there was a reason, and Marcus Cole always found reasons. He spent days in the town records, going through deeds and surveys and old correspondence. That's when he found it. Jonathan Brenner had donated land for the mission ruins back in 1862, specifically requested that a memorial stone be placed on what the surveyor had noted as unmarked ground. He rode out to the mission that afternoon. The old adobe walls were crumbling, swallowed by sage and wild roses, the same flowers that grew at the mission ruins, the same flowers that would have bloomed the night Isabella died. He began to dig. 2 feet down, his shovel struck metal, a rusted box. Inside were letters, love letters from Isabella to Daniel, never delivered. And one final letter, dated August 15th, 1862, that made Cole's blood run cold. My dearest Daniel, if you were reading this, then Brenner has succeeded in his threats. He has sworn that if I will not marry him, I shall marry no one. He knows about our plan tonight. I fear what he may do, but I carry no fear in my heart, because I carry your love with me, and Esperanza will bring me to you, no matter what darkness stands in our way. Wait for me, my love. Even if death itself tries to stop me, I will come. Cole rode back to town with the letters clutched in his hand. For the first time in his career, he didn't have a rational explanation. He had something else. A truth. That night, he told Sarah and Thomas everything he'd found. The three of them stood in the marshal's office, surrounded by evidence of a love that had transcended death, and a horse who'd been trying to complete his final mission for 25 years. Esperanza has been searching, Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. He's been trying to bring Isabella to Daniel. He's been trying to finish the journey they started. Thomas nodded slowly. But Daniel is gone, buried in Tennessee. The mission is empty. Esperanza doesn't understand why his rider won't wake, why the man who was supposed to be waiting isn't there. Cole's jaw tightened. So what does he need? How do we help a ghost horse rest? Sarah looked out the window at the gathering dusk. We tell him the truth. We show him that the love he carried didn't die, that it mattered, that Isabella reached Daniel, even if it took death to bring them together. That night, the entire town gathered in the square. Word had spread of what Sarah, Cole, and Thomas had discovered. Miners stood beside shopkeepers. Families brought their children. Even the saloon girls came, their faces somber. They were waiting for midnight. As the church bell began to toll, the temperature plummeted. A wind rose from nowhere, carrying the scent of sage and wild roses, the same flowers that grew at the mission ruins, the same flowers that would have bloomed the night Isabella died. On the 12th chime, the Stallion appeared. But tonight was different. Esperanza was agitated, paw on the ground, his ghostly form flickering like candlelight. His eyes swept the crowd, searching, always searching for something he couldn't find. Sarah stepped forward, the letters clutched in her hands. Thomas moved beside her. Marshal Cole stood at her other side. Esperanza, she called softly. The Stallion's ears pricked toward her. She walked closer, slow and steady, until she was near enough that she could see the desperation in those ancient, faithful eyes. You've been looking for him, haven't you? For Daniel. You've been trying to complete your journey, to bring Isabella to the man she loved. The Stallion tossed his head, that same anguished cry echoing through the square. Sarah held up the letters. She wrote to him. Before she died, she told him she was coming, that nothing would stop her. Not Brenner, not death itself. Her voice broke. You tried to save her, didn't you? When you went over that cliff, you tried to protect her. The Stallion grew still. Daniel waited, Sarah continued, tears streaming down her face. He waited all night, and when he found you both the next morning, his heart broke. He buried you together, near the place where they were supposed to start their new life together. He never forgot her, Esperanza. He loved her until the day he died. Thomas stepped forward. The journey is complete, old friend. Isabella reached Daniel. Maybe not the way you planned, but love always finds a way. They're together now. They've been together for 25 years, waiting on the other side. Marshal Cole's voice was rough with emotion. You can rest now, Esperanza. Your rider is safe. Your promise is kept. You were the most faithful companion anyone could ask for. but it's time to go home. The wind swirled around them, and then, impossibly, miraculously, something changed in the air. A second figure appeared beside the stallion, translucent, shimmering, a young woman in a riding dress, her dark hair adorned with white roses. Isabella. She placed her hand on Esperanza's neck, and the great horse finally grew calm. She looked at Sarah with eyes full of gratitude and ancient sorrow, then turned toward the mission ruins. And from the shadows of those crumbling walls, another figure emerged, a young man in cavalry blue, Daniel. Isabella's face transformed with joy. She took a step toward him, and then another, and then she was running. They met in the middle of the square, and when they embraced, a light burst from their joined forms, warm and golden, like sunrise after the longest night. Isabella turned back to Esperanza one last time. She pressed her face to his neck, whispered something only he could hear, and kissed his muzzle. The stallion bowed his great head, and for the first time in 25 years, his eyes held peace. Then Isabella took Daniel's hand, and together they walked into that golden light. The glow expanded, filling the square, filling the hearts of everyone who watched, and then, gently, like a candle extinguished by a soft breath, it was gone. Esperanza stood alone in the moonlight. He looked at Sarah, at Thomas, at the gathered crowd, and then, as the last whisper of that golden light faded into the stars, the faithful stallion turned and walked toward the mission. With each step, he became more transparent, more free. By the time he reached the ruins, he was barely visible, just a shimmer of silver in the darkness. And then he too was gone. The haunting was over. The next morning, Sarah, Marcus, and Thomas rode out to the mission ruins. The sun was just cresting the mountains, painting the desert in shades of rose and gold. They found what they were looking for near the memorial stone. An old grave marker, weathered and tilted, almost completely hidden by sage. The inscription was barely legible, but Thomas traced it with his fingers. Isabella Morales y Esperanza, together in death as in life, 1862. Daniel buried them together, Sarah said softly, just like Thomas said. Cole removed his hat. We should mark this properly. The town should know the whole story. Over the following week, the people of Redemption Ridge came together to restore the mission ruins and create a proper memorial. They carved a new stone. Here rest Isabella Morales and her faithful horse Esperanza, who rode through death itself for love. And here, at last, she found her Daniel. May all who pass remember, true love cannot be broken, not by jealousy, not by distance, not even by death. August 15th, 1862. Sarah planted forget-me-nots all around the grave, blue as the ribbon Esperanza had worn for a quarter century, blue as the promise that never faded. The town changed after that night. People spoke more kindly to one another. Old grudges seemed petty in the face of what they'd witnessed. Husbands held their wives closer. Parents cherished their children more deeply. Love, real, true, sacrificial love, was honored in Redemption Ridge. Marshal Cole kept Isabella's letters in his office, available for anyone who wanted to read them. He never again dismissed the things that couldn't be explained by logic alone.
Thomas Whitehorse placed the old photograph of Isabella and Esperanza in his shop window where the morning sun could warm it. A remembrance, a tribute, a story told and retold to remind the frontier that some bonds are eternal. And Sarah continued teaching, but now she told her students about Isabella and Daniel and the faithful horse who searched for 25 years. Not as a ghost story, but as a truth, that love is the most powerful force in the universe, stronger than hatred, stronger than time, stronger even than death. The haunted stallion was never seen again in Redemption Ridge, but on quiet summer nights, when the moon is full and the sage blooms sweet, people say you can still hear the distant sound of hoofbeats. Not lonely anymore, but joyful, free. Some claim it's just the wind whistling through Devil's Pass. Others know better. Because Esperanza kept his promise. For 25 years, through whatever mysterious force binds the faithful to this world, he searched for the man his rider loved. He carried her memory through the long, lonely decades. He never forgot. He never gave up. And in the end, love won. Not the way anyone expected, not the way Isabella and Daniel had planned all those years ago beneath the cottonwood trees in Santa Fe, but love always finds a way. Daniel waited. Isabella rode through darkness to reach him. Esperanza carried them both in his heart until the moment they could finally be reunited. That's what love does. Real love. The kind that makes you brave enough to defy death. The kind that makes you wait a lifetime. The kind that makes a faithful horse search for 25 years across the boundary between worlds. That kind of love doesn't end. It echoes through time. It changes towns. It reminds us what matters. In Redemption Ridge, they learned that night that the frontier isn't just about silver and survival and the hard business of building towns in the wilderness. It's about the hearts that beat beneath all that dust and danger. It's about the promises we keep, the loves we honor, the faithfulness that endures when everything else fades. Esperanza taught them that. A ghost horse with a blue ribbon and a promise to keep. And Redemption Ridge never forgot. Now, tell me, what would you have done if this happened in your town? If you witnessed a love so powerful it transcended death itself? And where are you watching Whispering Frontier Love Tales from? If you enjoyed this frontier journey, please subscribe for more powerful Wild West stories where love conquers all, even the vast wilderness between life and death. Until next time, may your heart be brave and your love be true. This has been The Haunted Stallion.